is how you brand it. So we're gonna talk about a whole bunch of different stuff. Yeah, cool. So to start, I'm sure everybody here knows, so this is not gonna be new information, but I figured we'd like level the playing field and talk about like what is cognitive science to begin with. And so the most like high level formal definition, it's just the interdisciplinary study of the mind. And that encompasses like a whole wide range of different subfields. And one of those is artificial intelligence, which asks, we build like a virtual model of the mind. And that can be anything from like a sort of small, kind of old school artificial intelligence, like clustering algorithm, to like a full-on robotic simulation. Neuroscience, how the brain gives rise to the mind, which can be everything from like the systems neuroscience, biological level, to like kind of the whole brain-wide fMRI or EEG scanning. Things like philosophy, what does it even mean to have a mind? Like, does an ant have a mind? Does a colony of ants have a mind? Psychology, which asks sort of what processes exist in the mind behaviorally, kind of like, be like the sort of classic realm of explaining things like fear and emotions and conditioning, or design principles. It's kind of a more recent expression of this, or behavioral economics. So there's like a whole variety of different lenses through which to ask those questions. Linguistics, which is focused on how humans and their minds create language, which is really like one of the most unique properties to the human mind. And that's everything from like, how do we understand language? How do we produce language? Anthropology, like how did the mind develop? Like how do we evolve as people? What other animals might have sort of the same kind of minds that we do? Kind of like what processes in our evolution led us to where we are now. Like there's a really interesting idea that fire, the invention of fire, really like rapidly bootstrapped our cognitive capacity, because now we could cook our food. And so our body had to expend a lot less effort to digest food and process food. And it was able to sort of offload that into cognitive processing. Cool. And there's like a whole wide range of topics beyond that. That's kind of like a core component. And I think a logical next question asks, what can I do with cognitive science? It turns out you can do actually like quite a lot. So today in this talk, I'm going to talk a little bit about what I do, maybe half and half, and then I want to sort of shift the conversation so that it's kind of more of a group conversation. I want to hear from all of you about sort of your interests and your goals, concerns, etc. So to answer the question of who am I, this is me. I graduated this past year with a degree in computer science and cognitive science. Currently, I work at a research lab at MIT, and I work part-time at Columbia's Center for Theoretical Neuroscience. I got to help build a really cool club, just taken obviously pre-corona. There I am in a crowd of people, and it's kind of weird to look at now. It's like uncomfortable in a way. So what are some of the things that I work on? At MIT, I'm part of the Computational Cognitive Science Lab, run by, I saw our logo, it's run by this guy, Josh Tenenbaum, this genius of a man. And this lab sits at the intersection of artificial intelligence and cognitive science. And it asks kind of at a very high level, on the one hand, how can we use tools from probability and computer science and engineering to better understand the human mind? And that's like, it encompasses a wide range of things: decision-making, reasoning, learning. They draw a lot from developmental psychology, like infant and toddler growth, as well as like a term called the cognitive core, which we'll get into a little bit more. But it's just the idea that you have like a core set of cognitive capacities that you're born with. And then conversely, they ask, how can we use those insights from cognitive science to build more human-like AI? And that kind of draws from this idea that humans are really good at a lot of stuff that machines are really bad at. And so how do you cross that gap? And this is actually where a lot of developmental psychology comes in, because toddlers are sort of the best learning machines that we know. They're really good at learning things from almost no data, which is something that a lot of machine learning can't do. So how do you train an AI that can learn with substantially less data? How do you build sort of models that understand the world? And they use sort of tools like probabilistic programming and a whole wide range of more things. So I was going to talk about a few of the like areas of the lab that I've been more or less involved in the first few months that I've been working here. And so the first is there's a really, really cool topic called program synthesis, which I discovered when I got here. I think it's kind of still a small community, but it's growing really rapidly. And to sort of motivate this, I want you all to look at this picture over here. And you'll see, can you see my mouse? Cool. So what you have here, the setup is that you have some input, and then there's some rule that transforms this input into that output, right? And so you get 3 examples in this case. And the question is, can you figure out what that rule is that transforms this input into that output? So I'm gonna give you like a few seconds to look at it yourself, and kind of like try and just, if you had to describe to a friend how to solve this problem, think about what kind of description you would give. And if you like wanna, if you think you've figured it out, try to put it in the chat, or you can like unmute yourself and give it a try.
Okay, can I take a stab at it?
Yeah, go for it.
All right, so is it for every square you would create 9 squares around it of the opposite color on like the opposite hex code, right?
Yeah, I think that's a good way to describe it. Does anybody else want to give like an alternative description? There's no exact one right description. That's kind of one of the interesting parts about this is that you can describe the answer in many different ways. Do people agree with that generally? Does anybody want to give it another description of their own?
I would take ions, and then also if it's a corner or an edge, you just do the sides that aren't on the opposite side are all thick red.
Yeah, cool. So the next step in this is to take a new like test input. So that was your training data. Now you have some tests data. And the question is, can you use that description that you just generated to solve this task? So you can look at it and kind of think about it for a second. It's sort of hard because you can't actually draw it in. But if you imagine something that looks like this, then you've done, I think, a good job, and you solved this task. We could try it one more time with maybe a little bit of an easier example, and it's maybe a bit interesting to think about what makes one example easier than another example. But how about this pattern? Does anybody want to give me like a description to solve this one?
If it's gray, then you would invert it to black. And if it's not the color that you're looking at, you would invert it again.
Okay, cool. Anybody else want to offer a complimentary? Everyone sort of agrees. Cool. So the question is, can you then take that description that you just used and use it to solve this this new input task? Probably. I imagine actually for most of you, this is probably a much easier one. If this is kind of like what you imagined, you've solved this successfully. And these examples come from something called the Abstraction and Reasoning Challenge, or ARC, which was designed by a guy named Francois Chollet, who's a really big deal in the world of artificial intelligence. He created one of these really popular machine learning languages called Keras, you may be familiar with. And he basically created this whole data set of examples like this to kind of tease out this property that people have of really like abstract reasoning and understanding sort of these like patterns and how to transform them. And that's an area that machine learning is really bad at. So he created this challenge to basically build a AI that can solve this task. And there's like $20,000 of grand prize money. And the actual challenge itself is over, but like the research is ongoing. And the idea is that to solve this task, kind of what you have to do is synthesize a program that explains like step by step how you go from some input to some output, right? It's sort of like kind of like writing code. And the interesting thing is that you can actually make the case that we do this all the time. There's a cool paper published from a recent PhD grad from the lab named Josh Rule called "The Child as a Hacker," and it argues that basically this idea that we're writing code or like coming up with programs in our head is actually a fantastic analogy for how kids learn and how people do all sorts of things. Some examples would be like creating a blueprint, is you can think of as an example of you're kind of constructing a program for someone else to use. Like writing music, it's sort of a program for someone else to read off of and create music, like making football plays. These are all sorts of examples of programs that people create all the time. And the interesting question is, how do you go and build AI to do the same thing? And there's a really, really cool paper, if you're interested, I'd highly recommend you check it out, called Dream Coder from the lab, also a recent PhD grad named Kevin Ellis. And what this does, so up here, we kind of examined how this idea plays out in humans. Now the question is, can we translate that to machines? And this system basically has this really cool interplay between learning while it's awake and then sleeping and dreaming. And in doing so, what it learns to do is take a small set of initial examples, things like, count or add a list together. And it learns how to basically build this library of programs using things that it has learned before and recombining them in flexible new ways in order to do a really wide range of tasks, everything from like building towers of blocks or creating graphics to like discovering laws of the universe. And I didn't include any here, but there's some really cool pictures of like the sort of dream phase that this has, where you can see kind of the weird dreamlike state. It will produce like graphics that look kind of really wonky and strange. And it's sort of it tangibly feels like this is kind of something that would come up in a dream. And so this is like a really cool area. It's kind of very, very new and young. Highly recommend you check it out more if it's a thing that seems interesting to you. Another area I've been working on is this idea of perceptual modeling. So if you were to look at this first video over here, could you guys tell me what you see?
A human.
Yeah.
Looks like a man walking, or a
Yeah.
woman.
And you probably picked that up in the first second. And that maybe like you might take it for granted that it's a person. It might seem kind of obvious, but really it's actually almost incredible that you can figure that out from kind of what is really just some dots moving around on a page. This isn't a person. This, if you compare it to an actual person, look almost nothing like, right? But your brain is able to do this really cool example of like hierarchical inference and sort of go from like the ground up and say, okay, well, this is what a human looks like, and these look like legs, and it's able to kind of build this model of a human really, really quickly. Another example would be something like this. So this is a murmuration of starlings. It's a flock of hundreds, maybe thousands of these birds. And I'm sure that, it's like really pretty. But I'd expect that when you look at this, most of you don't see hundreds of individual birds. You probably overall see this like blob of amorphous shapes kind of morphing and twisting about as the birds move around. Even though this was really just like a lot of individual birds, you see the whole. Another example would be over here in this picture. It's kind of incredible, but you can go from what is actually just like a 2D scene of dots moving around, and you see like shapes, like 3D shapes, and you're able to figure out what those shapes are, how they're moving and twisting. And if you were to show this to like a computer vision system, it would fail horribly. It would have no idea. It wouldn't even come really close to the incredible ability that you have to sort of generate this like really rich and beautiful world of shapes and images. And this is an example of these sort of gestalt principles of perception, where you have this sort of kind of top-down view of the world, and it lets you fill in a lot of the gaps and kind of answer a lot of questions that would be really hard otherwise. And the question is, how do you build what are called generative models of perception, models that have like an underlying idea of how the world works and looks, in order to basically better capture the kind of human element of these scenes. And this draws a lot from tools in Bayesian probability, as well as kind of typical machine learning. And then kind of one of the last areas that I've been involved in is this idea of intuitive physics. And to kind of, it's probably a term you haven't heard before, but to sort of motivate it, looking at this picture over here, can somebody tell me whether or not this tower seems like it's gonna fall? It's like a yes or no, you like nod or shake your head.
It's gonna fall.
Yeah, probably most people would say it's gonna fall. I reckon you probably can tell which way it's gonna fall. You might even be able to figure out where she you might like, a general idea of where she pulled the block from. And the idea is that you kind of have like this intuitive sense of physics, right? Like right here, this isn't a video. You can't see things moving. This is a single frame. And from this single frame, the amount of data that you're able to extract is actually like truly, it's extraordinary. And what makes us so good at doing this is that this idea is that we have this kind of like a physics engine in our head, kind of like you would have in a video game. And you're able to use this physical video game engine to like simulate the world around you. And you're able to use those simulations to make really, really fast judgments about things like physics. And this is like a thing that babies do from a really, really young age. And it encompasses things like object permanence, which most computer vision systems, again, kind of lack completely. This is also an interesting picture because it captures another idea of what's called intuitive psychology, which is maybe, I think, an analogous term for theory of mind somewhat. But if like, I only gave you this tower of blocks, you would be able to solve all those questions. But if I also give you this whole picture, including all the faces, you're able to use those faces to make some extra assumptions and like have some extra confidence about your idea because you have this intuitive understanding of psychology, this intuitive model of how other people think. So that's what I work on primarily at MIT. And then this sort of is a kind of last point about intuitive physics. It translates into this idea of like really cool tool use. And this is not super important, but it's a fun video, so I'll let it play for the next few seconds. It's just like a kid learning how to use a tool really quickly to solve like a hard task, which is again something machines can't do, toddlers are really good at. So now at Columbia, I kind of work on a very, very different track of things. It's a lot of like neural data analysis, and I'm going to go through this kind of quickly because I kind of want to talk more about you guys, but it's fun, so we'll go through it. And basically the setup for these experiments goes like this. So you have a mouse, and this mouse's head is basically glued to an electron microscope, and it's sitting on a styrofoam ball that's suspended in the air. So it can like run around on this ball, and it can look around on this, there's like a screen in front of it. And all the while, like it can't really move its head, so you can get a really good recording of this mouse's brain. And like also in this case, I have these very close-up videos of the mouse's eye, so you can see kind of what it's looking at. And this is really important behavioral data, right? So you have on the one hand behavioral data, and on the other hand you have neural recordings. And at least for the work that I've been doing in the lab that I've been working in, these recordings are from what's called the V1 portion of the visual cortex, which is like the very, very, very earliest part of the visual cortex, where really like kind of the beginnings of scenes are being processed. You have like kind of simple lines and like cells that detect like really kind of like simple lines and curves. And so now what you can do with this kind of data is essentially take your neural data and see if you can build a model that is able to basically, using these neurons, reconstruct the behavior that you saw. So can I use these neurons that I recorded in the visual cortex and reconstruct the behavior that the mouse was doing at some point in time? And actually, like, it turns out you can do a reasonably good job. So here's the original video, here's the reconstruction. And you can see it's not perfect. Like there's some kind of interesting artifacts, like the eyes move in a bit of like a weird way, but all in all, this does a fantastic, like a pretty good job, I would say. And all this is just kind of like additional like model information. It's not really relevant. And so that's pretty cool because you can use neurons to predict behavior and like recreate behavior essentially. But you can ask some kind of more interesting questions because we have some more interesting data. And so you can look at things like, how do specific cell types in the brain represent like different kinds of behavior? So in this data, I have a lot of like excitatory neurons, and there are also inhibitory neurons. So those are like the two broad classes of neurons that you have in the brain, excitatory and inhibitory. And you all have like specific kinds of inhibitory neurons as well. And so now we can ask what happens if I take just like 85 inhibitory neurons and use those to try and reconstruct behavior. And you can see that, well, we're using a lot less, like far fewer cells. So the reconstruction that we get is not quite as good. You know, it's a bit noisier, but altogether it's not, I would say, bad. And then you can ask another question, which is, what happens if I had just 85 excitatory neurons? And this is interesting, you get really like kind of a crazy reconstruction relative to like what we had before. And it kind of points to this idea that like these two cell types are doing sort of entirely different things. So if you had none of these inhibitory neurons, like what would your behavior look like? And it's also interesting because why is their behavior represented in the visual cortex at all? And you can kind of ask more questions, but that's what I've been working on there. So cool. That's, yeah.
Can I ask a quick question about that last slide?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so the residual, that's comparing the neural reconstructed to the original and seeing like what's different, right?
Yes,
Between
exactly.
the two. Okay, all right. That's just one.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So like in a little bit more detail, the way this works is you train a machine learning model called an autoencoder, which basically it compresses your video and then it learns how to decompress it. And that bottleneck that you have in between the compression and the decompression, that bottleneck represents some sort of like important information about your video. And then you try and train another neural network or like a regression of some sorts that takes your neural data and learns how to predict basically these what are called latent states. And then the residuals are like, how far are you off from those latents? Yeah, good question. Cool. So what led me to this point where I am now? Maybe it surprises you, but at the start of school, I had actually almost no idea of what I wanted to do. In fact, for the first, I would say, like 3 months or 4 months of my freshman year, I thought I was going to join the Army. I was like pretty sure that I was going to be dropping out and joining the Army. I'm glad I didn't. I think it kind of worked out better for me. But yeah, I really kind of went into school with sort of no idea of what I was doing. I had a kind of general interest in like AI and vaguely neuroscience and psychology and philosophy. So I kind of took a lot of like random courses, and I stumbled kind of luckily, I think, across this Center for Cognitive Science. And I was like, oh, wow, there is like a field for me. This is fantastic. And from that point on, I sort of tried to get as involved as possible. And if you were going to take one thing or like one piece of advice away from this little like talk, I think that would be the piece of advice I would give. And why is that the case? So Rutgers is great school, definitely has its cons, not a perfect place, and it's also massive. And in a lot of ways, you know, being such a big school can sometimes be like intimidating, and it can feel like a con. But I'd argue that that's actually one of the biggest pros of Rutgers is its sheer size and diversity. And the reason is because there's just so many opportunities that are available, as long as you know where to look and how to look. So just like a few things that I was able to be involved in, obviously this club, which is fantastic, Hacker U, which is happening this weekend. You should go if you can. FIGS, I got to teach my own undergraduate class, and I got to like work on research. I published a thesis, like I got awards. It was a lot of fun, cool. But there was like no real like secret to what I did. A lot of it is like putting yourself out there. And the truth is that there's really just like a lot of small things, I think, that really helped me along the way. Maybe the most important thing, I think, is to not be afraid to reach out, especially I think at a place as large as Rutgers. No one's going to kind of hand you anything, right? No one's going to come up to you and say, hey, I think you would be a great person for like my lab, or I think you should really apply to this internship, right? That's just not going to happen. There's too many people. So in order to sort of get those connections, which exist, you have to like take initiative and you have to reach out. As a follow-up to that, like once you do sort of manage to get your foot into a door, the truth is showing up really is half of the battle. Like if you, maybe I think the best way to describe this is I think you would be surprised that if you just show up to somewhere and you're consistent about showing up and you show up like consistently, the impact you can have and the impact that people will realize you can have is really significant. People really appreciate that consistency, and it's really hard. Like this isn't easy. Showing up is probably actually like 3/4 of the battle. I think that's maybe an understatement. Like it's hard to be consistent. But if you can, people notice it and they respect it and they appreciate it. So yeah, that one as well. And then a really big thing, this is maybe also obvious, maybe you think it's like, why is this here? Of course, email etiquette. I should have probably included some examples of emails I got when I was teaching a FIGS class. You'd be amazed at the things that people don't proofread in their emails. Like the emails I've gotten to like spell my name wrong. They've like, I've gotten emails where I'm like, this person probably just like English is not their first language, and then they'll show up and they're like been living in America their entire life, and you're like, what happened? So yeah, proofread your emails. It's kind of like a first impression that you make, and if you make a good first impression, it really it helps a lot. And then this is, I think, really important, is that it's really easy to take someone not answering an email as like a rejection. For example, I think in my freshman or sophomore year when I was like, I should get involved in research, I thought, you know, like I'll email professors, and then I sent them, you know, one email, but like no one ever got back. And I was like, they probably saw it and decided, you know, it was no good. Realistically, they probably either didn't see it because they have like 20,000 emails that have gone unread in their inbox, or they saw it and they meant to get back to me, but they never did. And I think I learned this like most concretely when I was raising money for HackRU, is that you really like, you kind of have to send follow-ups for people. And it's not like it's not rude. There's a polite way to follow up to and kind of like bump something to someone into the top of someone's inbox. So that's like a really, really important thing. It's like, don't give up on the first try if you reach out and you don't hear back. And then some kind of pieces of miscellaneous advice of things that I think are helpful. And this is all kind of generic, but try as hard as possible to build relationships with the people around you. Obviously with, try and like create a good cohort of friends, but if you can build, relationships with professors or advisors and managers, really helpful. That's, everything from like going to office hours and maybe asking a stupid question, but, at least showing up to like actively seeking out people on like LinkedIn. You would be really amazed at the people who will reply to you. In general, I think people truly like, they do just want to help. And so it really does aid things a lot if you reach out with like a well-worded message or email and come off as like a regular person. It really is like a good incentive. And that like, if you reach out with good intentions, people tend to reciprocate. And people do, they want to help. It makes them feel good. So take advantage of it. Like, we live in an unprecedented era in history where you can pretty much communicate with anybody. I think that's been, I would say, exacerbated by the current like situation of the world. Like now more than ever, it's possible to reach out to someone in like a different country, a different place, someone at like the top of a company. Because why not? Like, worst case scenario, they don't get back to you, you follow up and they still don't get back to you. But best case scenario, you hear back and you get to have a cool conversation with somebody. So try and go out of your way if possible. Like, it's good to sort of put yourself out of your comfort zone every now and then. And then this is important, that it's okay not to know. So like, a lot of this talk was about, what you can do, but it's okay to not know what you want to do. Like, really, for the first like 2 years of school, I didn't know what I was going to do, where I was going. For a while, I figured I would work in like software engineering, and I kind of pivoted very late to a more research-focused career. And life is like, it's not linear. I think it's really easy to get sucked into this rat race, but truthfully, there's no reason that you have to graduate at like some age and get a job at some other age and get another job at some other, like, take your time, I would say. But that, like, it comes with a but. It's all good things to do. You always want to try and do your best, and this is kind of like a bit of a platitude, but even if you're doing something where you don't think this is like my forever career, if I'm taking like some class and I'm like, I don't really care about it, you still want to always kind of try to do your best as much as possible. It's easy to think this isn't relevant to me, so I don't really have to put in any effort because it's not going to make a difference in the long run. But the fact is, like, people appreciate effort. They respect they respect effort. They acknowledge it. And the world is, especially now, very interconnected and very small. So you don't know if, making a good impression on the person over here in a field I'm not maybe so interested in, the ways in which that can end up, pinging you to go over to exactly where you wanted to be, or the ways in which you find out that maybe what you thought you wanted to do wasn't in fact what you did want to do. And now that you've like started doing a good job at this other thing, you find that actually you're like really passionate about that thing. So yeah, really do always try and make an effort at least. Yeah, and then again, really, there's no rush. Like, life is not a race to like some top. It's really easy to like compare yourself to someone else and be like, they're at this point in their life, in their career. But that kind of assumes that there is like this one track on which everyone is riding. And like, I don't really know where that idea comes from, but it's not really the case. So yeah, don't be afraid to take your time. Don't be afraid to like try things and fail. That's probably one I could put on there as well, but also it can be easier said than done. Yeah, and so those are most of my pieces of little tidbits of advice. And so given all of that, I wanted to kind of turn the conversation around and get to know like some of you. So I'm curious, like, what kind of things you're all working on, what sort of like maybe fears or concerns you have, what kind of things you feel have like worked for you. or haven't worked for you? Open up to the floor.
Okay, I can go first. All right. Hi, guys. My name is Ayan. I am the current interim vice president and one of the event coordinators. I think I can speak for a lot of us when I say that it's very hard to keep motivated. So it's very easy to feel like you don't have to try for something, not because it won't work for you, but because your motivation is already
Finite.
sorry.
Finite?
I can't. What?
Carry on.
Okay. Your motivation's already spread like so thin that you kind of have to conserve your resources, right? And put it towards the stuff that I guess matters the most. And unfortunately, that would entail you like barely fulfilling your like requirements for classes and fulfilling like the bare minimum, especially at this point. And I feel like that. A lot of other people here feel like that. So I guess my question would be, people have felt like that even without this pandemic. So I was wondering if you've ever felt like that, and if there's any way to kind of dig yourself out of that.
Yeah,
Uh,
100%. That's a fantastic question. So yeah, maybe a lot of advice that's given is typically not like advice that people take themselves. I think if I heard this, I don't know if I would necessarily, I don't know if I take this advice myself. And like the fact of the matter is, during undergrad, I often, if not always, found myself like spread very thin. Like there are points in time, go back, when, where is this slide? Who knows? Okay, there are points in time, yeah, where I ended up like doing too many things at once. And there really is like, there is a hard balance to strike between kind of picking, hold on. Yeah, here we go. This is not super relevant, so I don't know why I brought it up. Yeah, so there's definitely a balance to strike between like trying to do everything really, really well and kind of picking the things that are important. Because at the end of the day, you can't do everything 100%. I tend to gravitate more to the side of like do a few things well if possible, but often like the path to there is like very very winding, right? Like in order to do a few things well, you have to do a lot of things, maybe poorly at times. And I think like people typically have a kind of intuitive marker of what things are important for you. Like I think there's usually like a sort of clear indication, and sometimes it's like not maybe so obvious, but you end up gravitating towards the things that are important for you. And I think there's usually a few things on like the border, like the periphery, where you're like, this is something that I maybe like see potential in and can focus on a little bit more. And then at those points in time, there's like always a question, like, are there things that I can drop from my life that are not important, that are sort of like a drag, in order to kind of focus my efforts on the things that I really do care about. And it's kind of hard in school, especially when you have to like deal with things like core curriculum classes. Kind of, I feel like the structure of higher education now kind of by design stretches you sort of thin. Which is, I don't know, not necessarily a good thing. But I guess to answer your question, I would say that, yeah, like that's a real thing. You can't do everything well. If you don't have anything that you feel like is like your thing yet, try and do well as like at as many of the things that you can, and kind of see like where your what's the phrase? See like where the darts land. So if you have like, like 5 different classes you're taking and like some clubs and this extracurricular and that thing, like, yeah, give it your best effort at all of them. But like the things where you really care are the things that you're going to end up doing a good job on. And that's kind of like a good signal of sort of what you should follow often. I feel. So yeah, there's always kind of like a tension between trying to do like a lot of things, but having only like a finite amount of time and energy in which to do them well. So there's no, yeah, I feel like there is no fantastic solution. And this is sort of a problem that plagues people throughout life, of like sort of finding that balance between doing a lot of things because you want to do a lot and doing just a few things really well. So I would say, like initially it helps to cast a wide net, and then kind of like you drag that net in as time goes on. You say, this works for me. This is something I want more of in my life. This is something I want less of in my life. You kind of slice and dice. I don't know if that's a helpful answer. But like ultimately, yeah, I think it's also okay to not always be, like trying to wear yourself thin by doing like a stellar, like writing like a publishable research paper in your like English lit class. Not to disparage anybody who obviously takes English lit. So it's an important topic, but yeah.
Oh, that was very helpful. Thank you.
Hi, Yoni.
Hey.
I wanted to ask, I mean, we've talked about this before, but I'm sure other people maybe have similar concerns, but as I'm getting to the end of my career here at Rutgers, it remains uncertain whether I'm gonna, go into a cognitive science field, or I'm gonna go into something else, or maybe I'll go into grad school for something. Do you have any advice on kind of like using cognitive science as a springboard for things that aren't cognitive science?
Yeah, so a lot of it comes down to branding. I had a similar struggle as you at the end of college. I was unsure of whether or not I would go into software engineering or take a job that paid substantially less doing research. And for me, that was really a matter of, I think, like following, it's kind of feels like stupid to say, but like following your heart. Like it really is, it was like a very hard decision to make, but throughout this, like I spent like a month agonizing of like whether or not I should like do this job or like take that thing, which is I think also like a really fortunate position to have been in. It was like a really fortunate, I was lucky to have a problem like that. But throughout that entire decision process, I think there was, at least in my experience and throughout like all of the decisions that I've made, like when I was planning on joining the Army in my freshman year, I was like really like consciously my mind was like, you've got to join the Army, like you're going to do it. But I think like very deep down, if I had to be really honest with myself, I think I knew I wasn't going to join the Army. And I think that's been the case for most of like the hardest decisions that I've felt like I had to make at points in time, that like I kind of knew kind of at the bottom of my heart, or like deep down, what I was really good, like what I was interested in, like what decision I was ultimately going to make. And kind of getting to the point where you feel comfortable making that decision. I don't actually have great advice. It's just sort of like a process. So I don't know if that helps answer the question. I also should say, like, there's a bunch of other, at least like alumni in the room. And if anybody else in general, even alumni or not alumni, have also like advice that they feel is like relevant. This isn't like I don't have all the answers. I have, in fact, very few answers. So, feel free to also pipe in.
No, that was definitely a helpful answer. I think it's hard, especially in, I think for a lot of people in university, it's hard to distinguish between like what their gut feeling is and like what they're actually, maybe looking to do and what they feel like that they have to do.
Yeah, I think a lot of that is like a function of the fact that all the people you're really exposed to in school are like professors. And what do professors know? They know about academia. So the things that they push are going to be academia, at least like maybe not explicitly, but implicitly, there's this idea that you should go and like, do research and continue on, like maybe get a PhD. I think the best way to sort of suss out whether or not that's for you is simply by trying a lot of things, if you can. Like try and get an internship doing something. If you can't get an internship, especially now it's really hard, try and do something that would be like kind of comparable. like in the realm of like, I can speak to what I know is computer science. It's hard to get an internship. If you can't get an internship, you can, spend a summer trying to like work on a project or something, and sort of create those situations for yourself, and sort of use them as like a marker. Like for me, I spent a summer or two interning as a software engineer, and I kind of didn't really love it. I felt like a code monkey, which is like not that much fun day in, day out. Is like, I didn't like that being my life. And I think if I hadn't had those opportunities, I wouldn't have had an easy time making the decision that I had to make. So I don't know if there's a really great way other than trying things. I don't know if anybody else wants to pipe in on that one.
I have something to add. I tend to be what's called like a decision nihilist. I don't think you can actually know what the answers to many of these questions are. I think you can kind of tell like what career you don't want to do very clearly, but you're going to be presented with a lot of options and you won't be able to tell which ones work. The other problem is you don't really have the option to try all of them. I've completed minors and learned later on that I don't want to do this. You can go pretty far into a field and learn very, very late that this isn't what you want to do. I think you have a lot more time than you might realize. A lot of people make career changes very, very late. There are people who become doctors at 40 years old. There are people who go get PhDs at 30, right? This isn't like the end all be all by any means. The strategy I sort of took in college is explore as much as you possibly can, learn as much as you possibly can about a variety of things. That'll probably increase your probability that you can actually find the correct career for you. But even then, I think most of the time you don't find the correct career, even if you do everything right.
Yeah,
Just,
to echo that point, like there's sort of a like a narrative in I don't know, culture in general, that there is like the perfect career for you, or like there's a thing that you were meant to be. Like as a kid, how many people here were like, I'm going to be, like an astronaut or like a firefighter or an actor? I spent like years thinking I'm clearly going to be an actor. There's like, what else could I do? And there's this idea like you have to like, follow your heart to do the one true thing that you actually truly deep down want to do. But often, yeah, that's not the case. Like there's no like perfect career. And in many cases, you kind of have to like work to make something the career that you want. So you have some job, like, I don't know, it's okay. Like maybe you don't love it. Like that's okay. Like there's, you don't necessarily have to, you can always like try something different. Or like try and get really good at what you do and make it into the, sort of the career that you like.
I have a fun share. So I was going through some of my old yearbooks. I found a yearbook when I was in 5th grade, and they had like a section where they were like, write down what you want to be when you're older. I wrote down, I will be a scientist that studies chemicals. My goal would be to try to find a cure for diabetes. I'm not that close there anymore. Interestingly enough, a lot of the people wrote down doctors. Some of them are doctors now. It's kind of or they're at least like in med school. So sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't.
Is that helpful at all? Like, does that kind of,
Yeah, that's definitely helpful. Yeah, there's a pressure for sure to feel like you have to have things figured out, but I don't have things figured out, so all you can do is try to figure it out eventually. And it's not like there's a time frame on that, so.
Yeah, like that really is an important thing, is that there is no like set curriculum or schedule for life. And I think actually often like the paths that are the most winding are the most interesting ones. Like, I don't know, people aren't that interested in a story that goes, like, I don't know, I knew I wanted to be a doctor and then I became a doctor and now I'm a doctor, right? Like the people who are like, oh, I dropped out of college and like I spent 2 years, like, I don't know, biking around the world, and then I don't know, advocated for chickens in New Guinea, and now I'm here as a lawyer. Like those are like interesting stories. So in a way, I think like taking your time and like really exploring and trying different things out, there's actually like a big merit to it. And like a lot of people are afraid to like get things wrong, like end up in like, oh, I'm doing the wrong job. But I think if you can do that and then you could sort of, decide to change your mind, it's usually like makes for good stories, which are the things that are ultimately at the end of your life, like more important than whether or not like you were making the right amount of money right out of school.
I think another cool thing that you guys could try to do, like for me at least, is like figure out what is missing in a company or maybe an industry, and then try to see if you could start an initiative to fill that gap. Like it's not, I mean, I guess that's really an entrepreneurial type of vibe, and maybe not everyone's into, you know, starting something from the ground up, but that's something that's really cool to like help you like decide what's going on. Not that I'm an alum or anything, but like on terms of like small projects and stuff like that, like when I feel like I don't have anything to do, I'm like, hey, what's missing? And then I try to figure out from there. I think it's a cool little trick.
So the Rutgers Consulting Club actually does a lot of stuff like that. They'll help out like local businesses. If you do data science, you could probably be involved in one of those projects, or even if you're just like someone who's generally a critical thinker. For big companies, I think it's a little bit harder because they tend to have their shit together for the most part. It's kind of hard to add value when you're kind of outside. It's usually small businesses are usually missing something because they don't have the resources. But if you have ideas for big companies, that would be amazing.
I'm curious, do people feel like generally that they're prepared for like some track of a career, or do they feel like there is some like clear option for them coming out of undergrad, or not at all? On a scale, maybe like on a scale of like 1 to 10, where do you rank it?
What is one?
One is, well, let's do 1 to 5 is a little bit easier. 1 is like utter hopelessness and despair, and 5 is like, I already have a job lined up. Yeah.
I think it depends on like
On the day.
oh yeah, the day. Mohammed, we're rating from 1 to 5 and you said 8.
Very confident.
Very
I'm
confident.
so ready.
But yeah, I think it depends on like how much time it's gonna take for you before you actually enter the workplace, right? So like I'm pre-med and I have so much time till I like get to like where I want to be as like a surgeon,
Yeah.
like a neurosurgeon, which is like fingers crossed the goal right now.
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of like I'm more sure that I'm going to find something, I think, because it's farther away, right? And it's hard for me to realistically assess like how sure I am to get a job until I'm actually at that point. So
Yeah, that does make sense. Well, I'm curious for the people who rated lower on the 1 to 5 scale. Is the reason because either A, you feel like you're not equipped with the necessary skills, or B, that you don't know where they're applicable, or some C option, which I don't know.
Here's an observation. What if there's like an imposter syndrome type thing happening here? We have to
Probably.
invert all the scores.
Oh, I should also add in like it's possible that some of you may have like gotten this idea from this talk that like I know what I'm doing. I should make it like I should have put a disclaimer at the beginning, like I definitely don't. And I have on a day-to-day basis like a lot of really tremendous amount of imposter syndrome. And the fact is that like that really goes all the way up. Like a lot of people have imposter syndrome. Maybe more people should have it that don't have it. But like, for example, at MIT, surrounded by like really smart people. And I was talking to someone who said, I was like talking about like this feeling of imposter syndrome with one of my lab mates, and they were talking about how the professor of their lab was talking to them about having imposter syndrome. And this is like a professor at MIT who is like really one of the top, like super accomplished in their field. But there's really like a perspective that you have to maintain. Like this person probably is looking at all of like the people around them that are maybe even better, and they're thinking, "Oh, what do I know? I'm like nobody." But it's an easy trap to fall into. So yeah, don't feel like offset by that too much.
I agree with that. And I also feel like the more you know, the more you realize you don't know. Because I feel like for me, the imposter syndrome definitely came in during like my junior and senior years, which is like down the line. And I think like even I am mentioned this point of like when you're farther away for something, it seems more like it seems like it's something that you can do. But for me, like I want to go into neurology, and now I'm sort of like playing that waiting game of like, will I get accepted? Like, will someone accept me, or will I have to, take a gap year and things like that? So just like the I think it's just like a lot of waiting and hoping, but then at the same time doing stuff. So I just think it's like a lot of, I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, that's totally fair. One thing I think that like at least has helped me, because I'm also in this position where I feel like I'm in a temporary position, and I'm waiting to get like somewhere else, is that it really is like that's also kind of like a consequence of this idea that like there's some like set curriculum of time on which life is supposed to unfold, and there's like a little track that you're getting pushed along in a cart, and if you're not getting pushed fast enough, or you're like not like running fast enough on this track, that like you're not doing it right. But like these like interim periods of time are like also your life, right? So um I don't know, I find that kind of helpful sometimes to sort of like take like a mental check and be like, yeah, like you're always kind of thinking future oriented, but sometimes it is really nice to sort of like forget about that and be like, yeah, I'm like a person right now doing my thing, and like I can sort of enjoy where I am right now. Like it's okay to be wherever I am because it's like just a person doing person things. um, like yeah, I'll be a person doing person things in like I don't know 5 or 10 years, probably assuming everything goes according to plan. Um, so there is something to be said about kind of taking a breath and realizing like yeah, it's okay to be wherever I am at the moment. Something.
Swapnil had a question in the chat. I think we were all kind of very active there, so we glossed over it. But he was asking how to successfully change careers, since a lot of careers and like people that are hiring require like high levels of certification and like a lot of study that goes behind like their application. So like how hard would it be to switch into a new career?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends on the career. Like, there's no like rosy answer of like, oh, it's just you're just got to do it. Like some careers are harder to make the jump for. I will say one thing that is helpful regardless is connections, and this is kind of why building relationships is so important. So just to give some additional motivation to this past summer I worked at a startup that does recruiting, or like AI and recruiting, and they're like very like kind of data focused. And one of the really interesting statistics that I learned over the summer is that something like 80% of jobs are filled through referrals, which is not really so fair, because it sort of creates this uneven job market. But the fact is that like if you have someone who can refer you to somewhere, it's like a foot in the door, and it makes it easier to get a job there. And sometimes like like how do you get a referral? Maybe you don't know the people who you need to know, but in those cases, like try and reach out and build those connections. Like it's sort of intimidating, but it is helpful, and it doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt to try. Like I guess it does hurt. It does it does hurt in the sense that like if people keep on not replying, it's discouraging. But like there's definitely I think in these cases sort of like it's like a U-shaped curve where you try, it gets harder, and like more and more unpleasantness. But then at a certain point, you kind of cross this threshold and you start seeing returns. Sometimes, and it's sort of hard to figure out, like how long does this like valley go for, and like whether or not I should keep on pouring resources into trying to do this one thing, or when you should switch to try and do something else. Which goes back to sort of one of the things that Mohammed was talking about, this like idea of like exploring things as much as you can versus like exploiting things. So you like, you explore, you try a bunch of different things, and then you find one thing and you're like, this is it. And you kind of like, it's like you can think of it as like a casino where it's like, you try a bunch of different slot machines and then you find one and you're like, this is the one that's going to give me the most money. And you like keep on pulling that slot machine, which is actually interestingly how a lot of like recommendation algorithms work, but that's a side conversation. hold on, I got way off track. What was what was the question again?
He was just saying like, if you don't really have like the necessary certifications and education to
Yeah.
switch careers, how would you go about, like, what would you advise for that?
So I can give you some advice. If you want to do medicine, it's pretty simple. You have to take those classes. No options. Okay, that's one. Law,
Oh,
you
no.
should start applying, right? Let's say you want to go to computer science. There are a couple of pathways. You can do it like a boot camp of some kind. You can go back to school. You can try to self-teach, but it's hard. You have to talk about the specifics of it. In most careers, there's always a pathway, no matter how late you are. Sometimes it's very hard. In medicine, you're just going to have to do probably a year and a half, 2 years of undergrad classes. Computer science, you might be able to skip away, but it's getting harder and harder. Now, having an undergrad degree is borderline a requirement for getting a job. In some other, but let's say you want to do like a shift. I actually don't have a particularly good answer. I think if you can somehow like do some kind of work in that area, however small, that will help you do it. So for example, like if I wanted to shift from like data analytics to UX, maybe I do some UX design projects, and like, I'm not gonna do that, but like that would make a stronger case because now I have some experience in a field that is relevant for UX. Yeah, it depends on the career. It depends on what you want to do, I think.
Yeah. That is good advice. Oftentimes also I think it's a matter of like just branding yourself and sort of seeing the connections between what you already have and what you want to do. And if you can like successfully explain to somebody why this previous experience translates into this other experience, that helps substantially, at least like getting a foot into the door. Sometimes it's not like, so if you want to make a 360 career jump, like, yeah, oftentimes you just need to like fully reset and start up. But if it's just kind of like a small tangent, then, you know, it's often the case that maybe you just have to kind of rebrand yourself. And this is another area where like it helps to have tried a lot of things. Like if I want to switch from, I don't know, what I'm doing now to like consulting, you know, it's useful to think of like, okay, well, what have I done in the past that maybe I could like leverage towards being useful for consulting, and what I do now that's kind of useful. And you sort of like combine, you like kind of package up all this stuff, and you like try and sell somebody on the idea that you would be good at what you're doing, you know. That is a really good question. I'm just gonna see in the chat if we have any other questions that I missed. Oh, this is an important one. Ion, what is your words per minute?
I'm hitting a solid consistent 120 right now.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's not bad.
King.
What kind of keyboard do you have?
You want me to show you? It's literally like a gaming keyboard. Look.
I have like intense keyboards with RGBs too. That's why.
And it's loud. It's clicky.
Yeah, no, I love
This is
clicky
veering way off
keyboards.
topic. So if anyone has any questions, just let us know.
Hey Yoni, I had a question with regards to like CS in general. So you said that you had done a engineering internship at a small startup in the past, but you know, when you felt that you were like a code monkey, that's kind of when you sort of wanted to go more in academia. You know, for me, it's kind of hard. You know, even now in a pandemic, companies are closing up their internships really fast. At what point, besides, you know, right then and there, you know, deciding to switch into an academia-based profession, did you realize like CS in terms of like just pure software engineering wasn't for you? Because for me, I'm in that sort of position. You know, I'm double majoring in CS and psychology. You know, I love both, but you know, I'm worried for if I get an internship, I'll just end up like a code monkey and then hate CS for the rest of my life.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think where I should start on this one. So I should also preface this by saying I'm not like settled on a career in academia. Like I don't think I necessarily want to end up as a professor. I think there's like a lot of cons to being a professor.
You'd be a good one, by the way.
Sorry?
You'd be a good professor, by the way.
This is the sweetest thing anybody said to me all day. Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. But yeah, so I don't know if I'm necessarily sold on like a career path in academia, but the decision I made, at least at this point in my life, was to value, like I took the job that I thought would give me more education and knowledge in like a, you know, maybe like a kind of like I chose in the decision between exploration and exploitation, I chose like exploration at this point. And whether or not I'm going to continue doing that, or if I'm going to decide to jump off and do software engineering, like I haven't fully decided. I think part of the decision for me had to do with like not feeling connected to the work I was doing. Part of that was just a matter of like I didn't feel like I was good at it at the time. Like in both like this internship I did this past summer, or like the summer before then, which was at like a kind of regular big boring company. Like I don't know, I was like an intern. I didn't really know what I was doing, and it's not fun to like be bad at something. So I was like, oh, let me try something different. Or like you can't like necessarily relate. I think there's a ton of software engineering jobs out there that are like really fulfilling if you're working on something that you care about, or like the way that you work on it is exciting. Like maybe like for a lot of people, a lot of the fun is just in like solving things. It's just in like the process of like, oh, I'm building a thing that didn't exist before, and now people can use it. So I wouldn't necessarily discount going into software engineering. Like a lot of like what you make of a job, and like whether or not I will feel like a code monkey if I take this job is ultimately up to you and like the mindset you have. And so, and like if you find that despite your best efforts, you can't, shake the feeling of like, oh, I'm not doing anything I care about. Like at that point, I think it's useful to switch. If you're already in software engineering, it's often easier to make a jump to other places. Like I had a conversation just like a week or two ago with a girl who was working as a software engineer, and she reached out to me about jobs doing like a research assistant position, and like that's a jump you can make, right? So if you are doing like software engineering, you're like, maybe I want to get a PhD, but I don't know enough. Like this, like an easy step, like a small step you could take in the right direction would be to go from doing software engineering to do some sort of like computational research assistant thing. And yeah, there's like a lot of different things. Like Sam makes a good point in chat that software engineering is like a huge field. So it might also be a matter of like finding what in that field is right for you. Mohammed, I think looks like he wants to jump in.
Yeah, so something I really hate about I guess like our generation, so we tend to put too much of a value on career. There's no shame in having a 9-to-5 punch out and living a real life. Your job is not like everything that there is. You like there's lots of things that can fulfill you in life. There's kind of like a whole picture, right? You can like be like okay with your job, I think, maybe I'm wrong, and like enjoy everything else and just view it as like this is how I make money and I'm okay with this. That's a move.
I'm just gonna let the plus ones roll in on that one.
Yeah, let's just do a audible +1. Thank you, Yoni. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I don't know if that's helpful or not.
Also, thank you, Mohammed, for the extremely inspirational quote. That was top tier.
Oh, okay, so it does look like we're over time. If anybody wants to leave, you can head out. I'm gonna stick around and hang out. But if anybody ever wants to reach out and talk more, feel free, please reach out. I'm on Discord, but you can also email me. It's my email, so feel free to reach out at any time if you want, I don't know, just to talk, or you're curious about opportunities and et cetera, et cetera.
Just talk on the Discord.
Yeah, or message me on Discord. Yeah,
you guys should talk on the Discord more, because
or just message the Discord.
yeah, it's great to have like people talking.
Advice. Yeah,
it's like a big email chain, except everyone can contribute all the time. So
yeah,
I should definitely do it. Oh, someone asked me what's the Discord. I can send the link in the chat right now. And before you guys go, I actually also want to make sure you're signed up to the email chain. So if you're not already on that, let me provide the link so that you guys can sign up right now. Okay, so here's the form for the email chain, and then here is the Discord invite. Hold on. All right, here we go. Yeah. Arif is saying we can add more people on the collaborative Spotify playlist.
Yeah. Also, I just want to say thank you to everybody for like showing up on this like normal Wednesday. So yeah, I'd appreciate you guys spending the time, deciding to spend the time. Yeah, it means a lot.
Thank you for presenting.
That was an insane presentation, Yoni. Thank
No,
you.
also it's really good to see all of you. It's really nice. Man, yeah. I can't tell you how many times I've like refreshed Twitter. It's like I know it's a bad day when I refresh and like there are no there's like no new tweets on Twitter. I'm like, oh no, this is bad. Just like doom scrolling all day.
Dude, I've just been refreshing the election results constantly throughout the day.
Yeah, it's like,
It's so bad. It's so bad. So bad. I have so much anxiety. I know I shouldn't have checked for like 3 days and just
oh, who was it just the other day that said I'm not anxious at all?
no, I wasn't anxious like a week before, but now that it's happening, man, like this is I didn't think he would actually possibly win.
Does anybody have money riding on this election?
Dude, I do, but I don't care about that much.
Oh, yeah, +1 should definitely be a national holiday. It's actually crazy
Yeah.
that election day isn't a national holiday. Okay, here's my pitch. This is what I would do if I was elected president.
Yeah, let's go.
I would get rid of Columbus. Like, why do we celebrate Columbus Day every year? That's like such a bullshit holiday. We should take the days that we've saved from Columbus Day, like not doing Columbus Day every year, and just like put them all on election day. So we have like election week. That's what we should do, I think. That's my campaign. What Patrick? Which Patrick mean?
Heads up.
This would be a Patrick mean.
Heads up. I think the call ends in 2 minutes. If you guys have any final thoughts, get them out now.
Yeah.
About
Well, I just want to say thanks for the I was like 15 minutes late, but I want to say thanks for the presentation, Yoni.
My slides.
yes, please. Yes, that would be great. Thank you.
Yeah. I have $15 riding on this election. It's a big.
I'm a dumbass. Like I don't even want to share. I actually put more bets down because dude, there was a lot of potential for like arbitrage just because of like the betting odds because it was flipping back and forth. It was really bad. Like I'm embarrassed at how much I bet now.
Where do you guys find people to bet your money on? Like, are you guys like
you can do it online. You can do it online, but like I have a lot of friends that are gamblers. Unfortunately,
I have a grandpa who is.
Yeah, not Muhammad being insane at poker.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not that bad. I know some. It's bad.
It's not that bad. It's bad.
No, I gotta get out of New Jersey. New Jersey is online poker. It's really bad.
They've just legalized weed, and now you leave.
It's just I gotta get away from the online poker. That's the real problem.
The New Jersey, like, I don't know if you guys follow the New Jersey Twitter account, but that account has been popping off. I think it's run by someone from Rutgers. But yeah,
This is the NJGov Twitter account. That is honestly like one of the best Twitter accounts in the world. All they do is like talk smack about how bad like Delaware is, how good New Jersey pizza is.
Jersey pizza is
I mean, honestly, New Jersey pizza is pretty damn good. But like, if anyone tries to like attack them, they'll just say like, your mom, and it's like peak, like 5-year-old humor. But like, that's what makes New Jersey Jersey,
Yeah. You retweeted a picture today of like a billboard that was like, "Welcome to New Jersey, the ganja state." It's like not a real billboard. Yeah.
I was literally just looking at it right now. Honestly though, I wonder like, I wonder how like the economics of this is gonna play out. Like, are we gonna have a bunch of like surplus money after this? You know what I mean? Like Colorado, I think like had like surplus after they legalized, and like if we could redistribute that to the proper areas, that'd be great. But
and we got New York right there, so
yeah. Is it legal in New York?
No,
it's not. Okay.
New York.
So I think Massachusetts has been like.
Yeah, it took 2 years in Massachusetts, so that's annoying.
Yeah, and also, it's not like there's a difference between like something being legal, I realize, and like available, because there's still all these rules about like whether like stores and stuff.
I was gonna be like
dispensaries. So like in Cambridge, for example, I don't think there's a single dispensary.
I saw something on social media, like as soon as it was announced, like, okay, we're gonna go, like this company is already set up to like open in New Jersey.
Really?
They were gonna try and make the existing medical dispensaries like recreational dispensaries, but then they shut it down because they said there's gonna be way too many people trying to get it. It's just not gonna work out, which is sad.
Yeah, it's a bad problem, sad problem I have.
How long do you think it will take? Like a year, 2 years?
I think there's like, so usually when it gets legalized, it takes like 1 to 1.5 years. But I think there's been so much established infrastructure to like follow up from and like actual established companies now. It could be like around 6 months if we get lucky.
Okay with that.
Want to bet on it?
No, I really do. I really got to stop. I have a problem. I really do.
I want to know how much money you put down.
Just raw amount.
Look, I ended up betting on Trump and Biden because I started like, I was like, oh shit, the odds are flipping. I gotta get the other side now. The odds are flipping.
Like,
it's really bad.
North of 100?
Like a few $100.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay.
Bad. It's not too bad.
A few is a relative term.
Like $10,000 in the hole.
No, I can't do that right now.
Italians are gonna like break your kneecaps if you don't pay up. Kind of.
You need the money up, Brian.
I gotta say,
I don't know.
Like I thought I moved into like, just a regular nice area. Like in like one of the first few weeks of moving to Cambridge, someone like my housemate dropped her wallet on the street and like some random woman returned it. I was like, wow, I live in like, what a paradise place. People return wallets. But apparently it's like not even close. I like a coworker whose husband works at like the Harvard Arboretum, which is just like a big park full of trees. And I was talking to her the other day about how like at the Arboretum sometimes they find like they'll find like dead bodies. They'll find like cow tongues nailed to trees, which is like a thing that the mob uses to like silence witnesses. So yeah, these mobs, they do exist. If you want to make some big bets.
I had a friend who like wanted to go to like an underground poker game that was like high stakes. I was like, don't do it. We don't know what the hell's going on there. There's some shady stuff that happens for sure.
Oh, 1 second. Yeah, everyone. Hello. I think there is this rivalry. It is real. Though I don't know. Can't really tell.
Is it real between like MIT's cog sci department? I don't even know if Harvard has a.
They have they don't have a